Back in 2017, a landowner in Michigan contacted me to come look at his property so he could have a roadmap on how to improve the habitat and hunting on his square 40-acre property. Before he bought the property from his family several years ago, this was your typical Michigan deer hunting property where hunters all had their favorite blinds and stands regardless of the wind direction. He also has 17 different landowners who touch his property border. He mainly saw does and small bucks during the hunting season. If he was lucky, he might get a glimpse of a 3.5-year-old buck passing through during the rut. This landowner was getting tired of the same old, and he wanted to make some changes for the better. A year before contacting me, he did some hinge cutting with a friend to create some cover for bedding. But like what happens with many landowners, he started to second guess himself on where to continue, how many trees to cut, and is this the right location for a bedding area? So instead of making any mistakes he couldn't fix later, he decided to get a plan in place with a hunting strategy that he could work from with the confidence that he wasn't screwing up his property. Fast forward 5.5 years later to today, now he's passing really nice bucks he rarely even saw before. The last few years he's been texting me daytime trail cam photos of bucks to get my take on if they're 2 or 3 years old. He achieved his goal a few years ago by taking his first 3.5-year-old buck with a bow. So since his property and situation was very typical in Michigan, we decided to do a quick overview of the work and changes made to his 40 acres the last 5 years in order to give other struggling landowners hope that better hunting is possible if you have a solid plan to execute. So how long has this property been in the family, Bill?
Oh, holy smokes, probably 35 years now.
So like in the 90s, 2000s, and kind of leading up to the last, 10 years, I mean, what did a hunting season look like on that property?
Well, years ago, it was just open woods, right? And hunting wasn't very good at all. But then they had it logged. And for a few years, it was pretty good. The guy shot some pretty decent bucks out of there, not anything huge. And then, as the trees grew up and it got open again, hunting was just dismal. I mean, where I would go out there and I might sit for 2 days without even seeing any deer.
Yeah. Wow. You guys had what, like shacks on the sides of open fields and
several different shacks and some down, way down deep into the thick part of the property. So that was, of course, back when we could bait too, right? So we'd throw bait out there and we'd see a bunch of does and fawns, and then we'd get some bigger bucks on camera, but they're always at night.
Yeah, right. So were you guys planting any food plots at that time or no?
No, never had one. I think Dad, he played around with one a little bit, 25, 30 years ago, but the soil is just so sandy that he couldn't do anything with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And so when it was time to go hunt, everybody had their own special spot, right? I mean, I'm going to my blind, no matter what the wind is, I'm going to my blind.
Exactly right. That's the way that was done for 20, 25 years. It's time to hunt. I'm going out tonight. I'm going to hunt this stand, and that's the way it is.
Yeah. Pretty typical though, So,
yeah, well, it's been that way forever, right?
Yep. So then, when did you finally get control of the property? When you were able to do what you wanted to do?
Well, I think I bought the property from the parents 13 years ago, and 5 years ago, probably, I started doing habitat work on it and really paying attention to all the stuff that we were doing wrong.
I think you had done a little bit of hinge cutting too before we hooked up in 2017. Didn't you do it?
And I did for 1 year. A friend of mine who was pretty good at habitat work, him and I worked on some bedding areas and worked on a food plot. That was the first thing that kind of got it started.
And then I think when I showed up, I think it was the spring, March of or February, I think of 2017, you kind of gave me a tour of the place, and we found some beds and some of those hinge cuts that you had done, so it was working already.
Yeah, it was starting, and it did help a lot.
Right. You were really getting to have some issues with some of your neighbors. I mean, I think you have, if I'm not mistaken, you have 14 different landowners that touch your property borders, or is it 11?
It might be 11.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember what that number is, but yeah, that's definitely a heavy pressure.
Yeah, and you got what, a lot of these little skinny 10 acres along your north side, you got like 4 or 5 different landowners just on your north property borders. Like that's,
Right.
you talk about a gauntlet.
Exactly.
I remember going up into your northwest corner and you had all that big open area there with the poplars, mature poplars. I mean, you could literally see all the way through that. And then we came in there, I think it was March of 2017, and we dropped a bunch of them big poplars. I think if I remember right, we were almost done. Your dad pulled up and it's like, holy cow, man, what are you guys doing?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Because it's a whole different concept, you know?
Yeah. That thing just regenerated so fast. I mean, the very first year you had a lot of whips coming up. And I think within, something like 2 to 3 years, it was, I mean, you could barely see the hand in front of your face in the summertime. It was so nasty thick in there.
Yeah, and it still is. Yeah, it really worked. It made very nice doe bedding.
Yeah. And I remember when we were done, I think it was the same day or shortly thereafter, we went in and we cleared out some travel lanes going through all the down timber that we had dropped just to give the deer a way to get through there. And
Right.
if I'm not mistaken, I think even like the next year we went back in there again to do some postseason scouting. And I think we even said then that if we could have done it all over again, we maybe would have created even more areas of deer trails to go through there, maybe kind of open it up a little bit because it was almost like it was starting to feel a little bit constricted in there, right?
Exactly. I did open it
Yeah.
up more and make interconnecting. Yeah.
Yeah. So, your food plots, boy, they were pretty poor sandy soil. And just in the last year or two that you're finally starting to turn a corner on that, right?
Yeah, I think this year's been the third year now with good food.
One of the big, huge changes that you made, and this was pretty much your idea, was to have an excavator come in and create that big V plot. You had connections with a local excavator. It took them what, 2-3 days to do it. I thought that was just phenomenal, and turn that open woods into a nice food plot corridor in just a few days. And then you had to go in there with your tractor and clean it up with all the roots and all that stuff. But
Yeah.
and then he piled them all up and made that big wall. That wall has been working out like a champ, hasn't it? Forcing them deer to go
Yeah.
around and then past your stands to get to the food.
Right. Right. And it's not so much blocking that they're afraid of it, but it just kind of encourages them to go, along that edge.
Right.
And if they want to go out to the other food plots, then they have to go to the end of the V plot. And at the end of the V plot, just coincidentally, there's a stand.
Right. And then now you've got that bank spline, not right on the edge where the food is. You got it back in the cover. And then, you did a little hinge cutting to brush it in too. And you can sit in that stand and you never have deer looking at that blind, do you?
No, pretty clean. I can go in there several times without getting busted.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you put another bank spline way over on the west end, on the west side of the jack pine plot, and, really put that in there behind all the pine trees and brush that thing in too. And I think your ability to get into there, deer in the plot not seeing you is huge as well. Because you used to have a wooden blind right on the side of that plot, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Every doe that comes in that plot, probably the first thing it did is look right over at that shack, right?
Right. So the ones we have in there now, those are all camoed in there. So several different people have worked with me right in that jack pine plot and never even knew the stand was right there. The stand was only 40 yards from them. They didn't even know it was there the whole time. I see deer coming from multiple directions when I sit. Never saw anything like that before.
Yep. And then, well, another nice thing that you did that really helped you out was you put in that access road on the east side, come in on the downwind side of the property and pop into a couple of stands that you got there. That's been a big, big help as well.
Yeah. Huge.
So, Bill, between 2017 and now today, the way that you share trail cam pictures with me, that it seems to me that your buck population increases as the season goes on instead of the other way around, years ago, correct?
Absolutely. Yep. It's still kind of odd that I don't really start seeing any decent bucks until, mid-October. But I think that's just the way the property is because it's not by an ag field. And that's one of the big differences. I don't have the advantage of 150-acre ag field wrapped around the property.
Right.
So they have to run out of food and find a secondary location before they come and visit.
Mm-hmm. But even like right now, I mean, you've got deer crawling all over your property. I mean, you got what, 6 to 8 different deer on every food plot. About time it gets dark, they all leave and go to the big ag fields, like what, a mile away or so, right?
Yeah, half-mile away. Yep.
Yeah.
I think that's where they go. A lot of deer now, a lot of does and fawns, and a lot of different, family groups. And it's really fun because now you can watch them. They come in from all different directions.
Yeah, that is awesome. You've got an issue too where your neighbors don't necessarily want to shoot any does, but at the same time, I think you've got a couple neighbors to the north there that they were kind of asking you how your hunting season was because they weren't seeing any deer, right?
If you don't have any food for them, right?
Yeah.
And of course we don't bait anymore in lower Michigan.
Yeah. Well, I think, you're seeing these deer not only because you've got the best food in the neighborhood, but it's the way you hunt. It's your hunting approach. You're not hunting any blind regardless of what the wind is. And, you're picking your spot. You're not over hunting it. And your stands and blinds are all hidden now. And, you've got great access to get into these spots. So to me, it's like your property has, done a 180 from these deer feeling like the property has been hunted with hunting pressure to now where I don't think a lot of these deer even realize the property's being hunted. And that's why you're seeing so many on trail cam pics during the day.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think they even know. They're very, very secure because, all of the after you open up for the plots, right, all the edges have now thickened up, and the bedding areas that we built 4 or 5 years ago now are all thickened up. So they've got, cover all over, and then, spectacular food to boot. Now, my cameras, they go off all right in the middle of the day, all day long, to where you got to be very careful when you go to your blind because there's going to be deer moving around in the open.
Yeah.
So the only way that I could do is I had to brush it in real heavy around the blind and sneak in from that back side of that blind where there's no deer activity.
Exactly. So what do you think, Bill, has been your best solution for food? I mean, you used to be heavy in clover.
I think the smorgasbord is best. The plots are only 3/4 and 1 acre and then a 1/2 acre, right? So it's too small for beans, too small for corn, anything that they can destroy. I can grow brassicas in there pretty good, but the grains are always easy. The oats and the rye and the crimson clover, and mostly the rye is still around come gun season.
Yeah, right. And so you're planting most of your plots minimal till.
Yep. Have it stirred up just enough to get the seed in there and then compact it in, because if I don't, the birds eat it or it's too light.
Yep.
And the sun, just smokes it up on the surface. It's even too light of a soil to grow buckwheat, Randy, and to use it as a crush crop. I've been unsuccessful in 3 years of trying to grow buckwheat in it.
Yep. I hear that more and more all the time. So, yeah, and that prevents, like you said, that prevents the birds from getting in there and eating the seed and from the sun smoking that seed. And your property has come a long way. I mean, it seems as though the age class of your deer on your property has really increased too. I mean, you shot your first 3.5-year-old buck, 2 to 3 years into this habitat improvement, right?
Right. Yeah, it was 3 years in. Yep.
Yep. To me, it's almost like you had to grow your deer herd into a whole new crop of deer that were not previously educated on the way the property was hunted earlier.
Yeah, and I believe that's exactly what's going on. I thought I'd be able to pull them in from other properties, and I really don't think that happened. And because every year the age class gets a little bit better, and it gets a little bit better, and I start seeing more of the bigger bucks, not Iowa stuff, but Michigan deer. Where we're at, we don't have the APR. A lot of the neighbors are shooting real small bucks. In my bedding area, in the south, I found 3 skeletons of dead bucks, and every one of them was a 3-point.
Oh man, come on.
Mm-hmm.
Really?
So that's really what you're competing with. I think they only got 2 pictures of bucks so far this year at night. All the rest of them been during the daytime.
So the bedding is close by. They're bedding on your property.
It must be. That's the only thing that can be happening.
Yeah. It's really cool to see somebody in Michigan, be able to defy the odds that so many people in Michigan face, especially with just a square 40. It can be done, and it's not, it's nothing that can happen overnight, but you're a prime example that if you just start, create that cover, develop the food, hunt it sparingly, hunt it smart, keep your blinds and stands hidden. Those 4 things right there, shoot, you've done them all 4. And 5 years ago, would you have expected, Bill, that you'd see 3.5-year-olds walking around on your property during daylight in the hunting season?
Yeah, because I know when I talked to you the first time that all you really need to do, if you have somebody that's a guy that does what you do for a living, all you really have to do is listen to them. I don't have to have my own opinion because you've already did it. So all I have to do is emulate what you've already done, and it'll work on my property. And that's basically what we've done. Because, before that I started working with that friend of mine, and then you took over, I didn't have any idea about, the wind direction, the cold fronts, and limited hunts on each individual stand, and walk trails to to each stand, and having multiple stands for multiple wind directions. I never knew none of that stuff.
Yeah, especially when it comes to, food plot, sandy soil, you figured it out. So it's awesome. But you know what, Bill? I think if you were to go back to hunting your property the way you did and the way your family did, your property would turn into just your typical average Michigan property where most of your activity would be at night again.
100% correct. Yeah. I can tell when I get invasive on a couple stands, my camera's in those, and I hunt there a couple times, my cameras slow way down in those zones for a few days.
Yeah. And you probably, when you're going in and coming out, you're probably thinking you're getting in pretty clean, but yet the deer know.
Right.
Hey, keep sharing them trail cam pics with me. And if you want to, I'd love to do another postseason scouting on your property again after hunting season's over in January. If you want, that'd be fun.
Yeah, that's a good plan. We'll see how it turns out this year. And
all right, Bill. Well, hey, good catching up with you
thanks.
again. We'll
yeah, you too, buddy.
we'll be in touch.
Yeah, you be good.
See ya.